Okay, so um, abandoned asylums, right? I mean, they really do capture the imagination, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
There's a certain allure to these places,
Mm.
a kind of morbid fascination I think we all feel on some level.
And for this deep dive, we have some pretty amazing source material
We do.
to really get into it.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at excerpts from a podcast called Uncharted Territories. Have you heard of it?
I have. It's fantastic. They actually
Yeah.
go into these abandoned asylums and interview experts and share their own experiences.
Yeah, it's really cool. And they have a whole range of experts too,
Yeah,
right?
they've got historians,
Yeah.
psychologists, even a paranormal investigator.
It's amazing. And you know what I love about this deep dive?
What's that?
It's not just about the spooky stuff, the ghost stories and all that.
Right.
It's about understanding the history, the psychology, the personal experiences that make these abandoned spaces so captivating.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
mean, to really grasp why these asylums are so haunting, we need to understand where they came from.
Totally agree. And that's where Uncharted Territories really shines. They actually go into detail about this with a historian named Dr. Emily Collins.
Oh, yes. Dr. Collins takes us all the way back to the 1800s.
Wow, so this is like the very beginning of the asylum system.
It is. She
Mhm.
talks about figures like Dorothea Dix, who really championed the idea of asylums as sanctuaries.
So the idea was to create a safe space for people struggling with mental illness?
Exactly. Dix argued that separating individuals from the stresses of society and providing a structured environment could foster healing.
Okay, so it sounds like it started with good intentions.
It did. The goal was to provide more humane treatment for the mentally ill. It was a huge shift from how things were done before.
But I'm guessing it didn't always work out that way.
Unfortunately, Dr. Collins points out that overcrowding quickly became a major issue.
Oh, I can imagine.
There was also a very limited understanding of mental health at the time.
Right, back then they didn't have the same knowledge or treatments that we have today.
Exactly. And that led to some pretty ineffective and, in some cases, cruel treatment practices.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, the podcast actually mentions the use of lobotomies
Oh, wow.
and other controversial procedures that were once considered standard practice.
That's disturbing. It's a stark reminder of how far we've come in our understanding of mental health.
It really is. And it also adds another layer to the unsettling aura of these abandoned asylums.
Totally. On one hand, they represent a failed attempt at care.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you look at the architecture, the grandeur of some of these buildings,
Right.
and it reflects this ambition, however misguided, to create something better.
Absolutely. It's that inherent contradiction that makes them so fascinating.
Okay, so we have this historical backdrop. Now let's get into the psychology a little bit.
Yeah.
Why are we so drawn to these abandoned places? Why do they creep us out so much?
Well, the podcast interviews a psychologist, Dr. David Moore, who offers some interesting insights.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He talks about the concept of liminality.
Liminality, what's that?
Think of it as this unsettling feeling of being in a place that's in between states of being.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Asylums are kind of frozen in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not functioning as they once were, but they still have these tangible remnants of their past purpose.
It's like you can almost feel the presence of the people who were once there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're walking through a ghost of a memory.
And then there's this other concept Dr. Moore talks about, the uncanny valley.
Ah, yes. That feeling of unease we get when something is almost but not quite human.
It's like those old medical mannequins that are supposed to look like people.
Exactly. It's unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah, big time. And Uncharted Territories actually gives a perfect example of this.
Oh, really? What is it?
Their host, Sarah, finds a child's doll with a missing eye at Cranbrook Mental Hospital.
Ooh, that's creepy.
Right. It's like these objects are imbued with this memory of human presence, but that presence is now gone, and it creates this really unsettling feeling.
Like you're left wondering about the child who once played with that doll. What happened to them? What was their story?
Yeah, it's like these objects become stand-ins for the people who are no longer there.
Haunting reminders of the lives that once unfolded within those walls.
And then there's the power of suggestion, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Moore emphasizes that too. Our expectations, especially in a place like an abandoned asylum, can really shape our experiences.
So if you go in expecting to be scared, you're more likely to interpret things in a scary way.
Exactly. It's like our minds are already primed to see and hear things that might not actually be there.
Makes sense. Especially when you're in an environment that's already so charged with history and mystery.
It's like reading a scary story.
Yeah.
Your mind starts to create its own chilling narrative.
All right, so we've got the historical context, the psychological framework. Now let's actually hear about Sarah's experiences inside these asylums.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
She explores 2 locations in uncharted territories, Cranbrook Mental Hospital and Willow Creek Asylum.
So they go to 2 different asylums. Cool.
Yeah, and she starts with Cranbrook. And her descriptions are so vivid, it's like you're right there with her.
Oh, I bet. So what kind of things does she find?
Well, she finds patient medical charts detailing treatments like lobotomies.
Wow, so you're actually seeing the records of these procedures.
Yeah, it's pretty chilling. It gives you this glimpse into the reality of mental health treatment in the past.
It's a far cry from the idealized vision of asylums as havens of healing that we talked about earlier.
Right. And then she stumbles upon something else pretty remarkable.
What's that?
A faded mural painted by a patient.
A mural. What's it like?
It's incredible. It depicts this fantastical world filled with vibrant colors and whimsical creatures. It's almost childlike in its imagery.
Wow, that's fascinating. I wonder what the story behind it is.
Yeah, it makes you think about the person who created it. What were they going through? What was their inner world like?
It humanizes the experience, right?
Absolutely. It reminds us that these weren't just faceless patients, but individuals with their own hopes and dreams and struggles.
I love that.
Then Sarah moves on to Willow Creek Asylum.
Okay, and what's that one like?
Well, one thing that really stands out is the children's ward.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and you can hear the emotion in Sarah's voice as she describes it. The thought of children being confined to these institutions, separated from their families.
Heartbreaking.
It is. She doesn't go into specifics about what she finds there, but you can sense the profound impact it has on her.
I can imagine. It sounds like a very heavy experience.
It is. It's a somber note to end on, but it sets the stage for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready to go deeper.
We've explored the history and psychology of abandoned asylums, and now we're going to get into the paranormal aspects.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Uncharted Territories also interviews Dr. Alex Peterson, a paranormal investigator who believes these places are hotspots for unexplained activity.
Okay, so we're going to hear from someone who's actually looked for evidence of the paranormal in these asylums.
Exactly, and Sarah's own experiences start to take a more chilling turn.
Oh boy, I can't wait to hear about this.
Stay with us as we explore the unexplained encounters, the eerie phenomena, and the lingering questions surrounding these abandoned spaces.
I'm hooked. As we get further into Sarah's explorations, you can, really feel a shift in the energy.
It's like she's crossing over into this other realm, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And Uncharted Territories embraces that. They bring in this paranormal investigator, Dr. Alex Peterson, who believes abandoned asylums are practically like paranormal hotspots.
And Dr. Peterson talks about something called residual energy.
Right. It's fascinating. It's like an echo, but instead of sound, it's an imprint of energy left behind by intense events or emotions.
So you're saying these asylums could be holding on to the energy of all the things that happen there?
Exactly. Think about all the intense experiences, the suffering, even the moments of hope that occurred within those walls.
Just like the walls themselves are absorbing it all?
It's a powerful concept.
Yeah.
And Dr. Peterson actually tries to capture evidence of this residual energy.
Oh, really? How do they do that?
They use a bunch of different techniques. EVP recordings,
Yeah.
video capture, the typical paranormal investigation stuff.
Right, right. And do they actually find anything?
Well, they describe capturing a photo with these weird light anomalies.
Ooh, spooky.
Right. It's hard to see for sure what it is just from their description, but it definitely adds to the mystery.
Of course. And I guess that's part of the appeal, right? The not knowing for sure.
Exactly. It leaves room for interpretation. And whether you're a believer or a skeptic, there's no denying the eerie atmosphere and unsettling history of these places.
For sure. And that brings us back to Sarah's own experiences. As she's exploring these asylums, she starts encountering things that are hard to explain.
Yeah, like what?
Like sudden temperature drops, for example.
Yeah.
She's walking along and all of a sudden it gets freezing cold.
Bruh, I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Right, and she's not just imagining it either. She describes it as this icy cold that comes out of nowhere.
That would freak me out.
And it's not just temperature drops either. Sarah also talks about seeing things.
Oh no, what does she see?
Fleeting apparitions, like shadows moving at the edge of her vision, or glimpses of figures that vanish as quickly as they appear.
Ugh, that's creepy. Like things just out of the corner of your eye.
Exactly. And you can't quite make them out, which makes it even more unsettling.
Especially when you're in a place that's already so steeped in stories of the paranormal.
Right. It's like your mind is already primed to see those shadows as something more sinister.
Totally. But even with the power of suggestion in mind, some of Sarah's encounters are really hard to dismiss as just tricks of the mind.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, so she's exploring one of the upper floors at Cranbrook, and she hears this faint, muffled scream coming from down the hallway.
A scream! That's terrifying.
No, right? And Sarah, being Sarah, she runs towards the sound thinking someone might be in trouble.
Of course she does.
But when she gets to the end of the hallway, there's nothing there,
Oh
and the screaming has stopped.
my gosh, that's so creepy.
Right. No explanation, no source for the sound, just silence.
And she has another experience at Willow Creek that's even more unsettling.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Tell me.
She's back in the children's ward, and she gets this overwhelming sense of sadness, like a wave of despair washing over her.
That's heavy. And it's not uncommon for people to report feeling strong emotions in places like that, especially where there's been a lot of suffering.
Right. It's like the energy of the past is imprinted on the place.
Exactly. Whether you believe in residual energy or not, it's a palpable feeling.
And in Sarah's case, it's not just a feeling. As she's standing there feeling this sadness, she sees a child's shadow dart across the room.
A child's shadow in the children's ward.
I know, right? And here's the thing, she wasn't the only one who saw it.
Really? Who else was there?
Mark, the co-host of Uncharted Territories, he saw it too.
Wow. So we have multiple witnesses.
Yeah, and they both describe it the same way, this fleeting shadow that just disappears.
That sends chills down my spine,
Yeah.
especially considering how emotionally charged Sarah already felt in that room.
It's like the combination of everything. The historical context, the psychological priming Sarah's own emotional state. It all created the perfect conditions for this kind of experience.
Makes you wonder if our own expectations and emotions can somehow amplify or even attract these kinds of phenomena.
That's a really interesting thought. It's like we're not just passive observers in these places, we're active participants.
And that's what makes abandoned asylums so endlessly fascinating. They're not just creaky places, but portals to the unknown, where history, psychology, and the paranormal all converge.
They force us to question what we think we know about the world and the nature of reality itself.
And they remind us that even in the most abandoned and forgotten corners of the world, there are still stories waiting to be told.
Stories that can both terrify us and make us reflect on the complexities of the human experience.
So are you ready to hear more about what Sarah uncovers? Or are you starting to feel the chill yourself?
Honestly, I'm hooked. Let's keep going. I need to know what happens next.
Then buckle up, because Sarah's journey into the unknown is far from over. And what she encounters next might just change everything you thought you knew about abandoned asylums.
We've talked about the history, the psychology, even the paranormal, but I gotta say, what really sticks with me is the sadness of these places.
Yeah, it's palpable, isn't it? Like you can almost feel the weight of all those lies, all those stories.
And it makes you think, what happened to all those people? When the asylums closed, where did they all go?
Right. It's a question that Uncharted Territories actually touches on.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, the historian Dr. Collins talks about the shift from asylums to community mental health care.
Which sounds like a good thing.
It was a move away from those inhumane treatments. But it wasn't a perfect solution.
What do you mean?
Well, a lot of former patients struggled to reintegrate into society.
I can imagine that must have been incredibly difficult.
It was. There was a lot of stigma, a lack of support.
So closing the asylums didn't magically solve the problem of mental illness.
Exactly. It's an ongoing struggle, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
It's a good reminder that these abandoned asylums aren't just relics of the past. They represent something much bigger.
They do. And that's why it's so important to approach them with sensitivity, with respect.
To remember that behind the decay, the ghost stories, there were real people living real lives.
Each chipped paint, each rusted bed frame, each faded photo tells a story.
It's heartbreaking, but also fascinating, you know? It's like these places hold up a mirror to our own humanity.
To our capacity for both compassion and cruelty.
It makes you think about how far we've come and how far we still have to go.
Right. And how important it is to keep learning from the past.
I remember something Sarah said at the end of Uncharted Territories. She said, exploring these asylums isn't just about ghost hunting. It's about uncovering forgotten histories.
Giving a voice to the voiceless.
Exactly. And that really resonated with me. You know, history isn't just something we read in textbooks.
It's live. It's all around us.
Especially in places like this. And we have a responsibility to listen to those stories, to learn from them.
I completely agree.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of awe, really. The weight of history, the enduring power of the human spirit.
Me too. These abandoned asylums, they might be empty, but they're far from silent.
They have so much to teach us about ourselves, about our past, and about the importance of empathy and understanding.
And maybe that's the biggest takeaway of all.